let's see what's going to happen. I think we're live. Yeah, we are live. Live on YouTube. Yay, with Abby. What's up, Abby?
Yay!
How are you?
I'm good, Mia. How are you?
Pretty good. For those of you who don't know, Abby is an amazing
I'm good,
human
Mia. How
being.
are you?
Ooh, why is that echoing? Sorry about that. Abby is an amazing human being. She's a registered dietitian nutritionist. She has personally helped me with my journey of loving food again and having my relationship with food. And that's one of the things she really specializes in, is helping people reestablish their relationship with food. And one of the things, Abby, I think I love that you do is you incorporate culture in this, which is so important. Like when we first met and I had a consult with you, I think one of your first questions to me was like, kind of foods do you like? What culture do you come from? What background do you have to learn how to incorporate the foods in there, right? And I love that. I'm like, yes, I'm Brazilian. I love meat and I love beans. So I was like, all of those things. So I wanted to just dive right in and chat to you a little bit about the love you have for nutrition, because it shows in your work, the love you have for your clients. Like I said, I had an amazing experience working with you. So take us to a spot when was like the light bulb for you that you wanted to be this kick-ass nutritionist and help people? Do you remember?
That's a good question. So it wasn't linear, as nothing is in life.
That's very
I
true.
started totally. I started college, and what do you do when you don't know what you want to do? Is you go to business school because my whole family's like in business. I'm like, I don't know. I guess that's what you do. Um, Long story short, lots of things happened. After my freshman year of college, I actually lost my brother. And so that was
Oh,
actually a time that gave me a moment to just pause and pull back and figure out, like, who am I and what do I want to do and what do I want to contribute to this world. Um, and growing up, I grew up in Flagstaff, Arizona. Actually, live again in Flagstaff, Arizona, which is really rad. But
yeah.
I was always active, dancer. We played outside all the time, like biking, running, all the things, climbing. And as a dancer, I really struggled with my relationship to food, as a lot of dancers do, and a lot of people in body-based aesthetic sports, and outside of body-based aesthetic sports as well. And
Yeah.
so I was injured for most of my high school career, stress fractures, ligament things, everything. And I was like, huh, I think
Dang.
nutrition matters. Yeah. I was like, I think this matters. And I didn't even know that being a dietitian was an option. I didn't even know that was a job that you could do. So I knew that I had to take like science classes at some point in my college
Yeah.
career. And so after that year, I was like, well, I guess I'll do that. And I took a nutrition class. I was like, you can be a dietitian. And yeah, so that was kind of what changed it for me.
The rest is history.
Yeah.
So
And
your
then
background.
through, oh, go
No,
ahead.
go ahead. You go. Go ahead.
Yeah, and then through school too, there was a lot of things that the nutrition and dietetics curriculum is very Eurocentric. Also, in a lot of ways, nutrition world is inherently really disordered. And so there were a lot of things that I was learning in school, and I was like, this sounds really familiar to when I was really struggling with my relationship to food and an eating disorder. I was like, this isn't cool. So that's what led me down the path of, being an anti-diet, body inclusive dietitian, and
Yeah,
then
yeah.
intermingling that with my love of sports and movement.
I haven't seen a lot of dietitians, except for you, because you're awesome. But I also have had my fair share of programs, of online programs, right? That like, here, let me help you partner food with a workout. And every single time, as well intentioned as those folks were, I never got the question of like, do you have any issues with food? Have you ever had any issues with food? Because once I discovered, my therapist said, you have an eating disorder, I was like, oh crap. And that's when you have to stop and think like, that's why you don't change. That's why you don't progress, because do the mental work that's required, right? To see why that's happening. And could you tell us a little bit about your approach with nutrition? Like, because you do things very differently. And I love that. And I really want folks to see your approach of how you work with your clients, you know, and how that sticks with people. And you do acknowledge people have eating disorders or they have an athletic background or an injury background, you know. So loaded question, but please.
Yeah, I mean, I think first and foremost, food is life. Food is one of our basic human needs. And that is something that I think has become really disjointed within our Western culture of we don't have a lot of food culture, and a lot of us have been immigrants or our families of immigrants, and we lose that through time. And so I think that that's one big aspect that I think is really essential to just existing and being a human. And food is also outside, I think, from a sports specific place. We know that food is fuel, but
Yeah.
food is also so much more than fuel. And we need to look at from the training and movement perspective. I will refer to exercise, quote unquote, as movement because I think it's a much more inclusive and fun term than exercise, because exercise is like a have to or something else you have to
Yes.
add onto your really busy day. And so I will use the term movement for those who are listening and don't know why I'm saying that. But I think, especially within the training world and sport world, it is just seen as fuel. And so we're not looking at it from a perspective of what do you actually like to eat? What did you grow up eating? What is interesting to you? What brings you joy? How are you connecting with food? Food is also comforting, and it should always be comforting. And it's also one way that from the beginning of time as humans that we have connected and built trust through food. And so if we're just seeing
Yes.
it as this one myopic point of view of it is fuel and it is calories and nutrients, we are missing this much broader picture of what food actually is.
Yeah, that's 100% true. You hit that. People often, I was told that recently. It's like, does your body need it? Then don't eat it. You know, whereas you have taught me the opposite way, which is you can have the things that you enjoy that brings you comfort, that, you know, refers you to this. There's just a method to thinking through when you're eating it, right? Like, yeah, someone said that to me the other day. They were like, because I'll talk to you offline about this, but they're like, yeah, if your body doesn't need it for fuel, then you don't need to eat it. And I was like, but that's not okay to think. I don't think it's okay to think like that,
No, and I
right?
also think that, every food serves a purpose, whether that's Starburst or Cheetos or whatever. I think when it comes down to a lot of times people ask me, like, what do I eat when I'm training, or what do I eat, when you're training and when you're say it's in a race or in the backcountry for a long time, it's like I don't care how nutritious it is. If you're not going to eat it, it doesn't matter because we all have that bar that's sitting in our hip packs or our backpacks or our top tube
Yeah,
bags that has probably been there for a year, and it's like that's probably I don't care how perfect it is or how expensive it was. If you're not going to eat it, that's not the fuel for you or the food for you.
that's an interesting point. And why do you think that is that people won't eat it? Because they're scared that it's going to be too caloric, or they don't think it tastes good? Like, what's that point about?
I think part of it, so say, let's take the bar example, right? So let's say you have, again, a bar sitting in your pack for that time when you really intend to fuel, but it's not interesting. You get at the top of a climb, you're breathing really hard, eating, let's just say, even like a nut and seed bar. If you're like, that doesn't sound good, it's like, great, not the choice. And so it's like, if you would rather eat a Starburst or a sour gummy bear or anything else at that point, that's the fuel that you need to be packing and bringing with you
I
because
see.
that's going to be the thing that's actually going to get calories and things in you as opposed to this like really well, perfectly engineered bar.
That's so true. I see what you mean. You know, the one thing you put me onto is the Scratch Lab stuff. Like, I love the scratch lad stuff. And that is stuff that I will eat now. Cause I used to be like that. I'm like, I don't want to put this goo in here if it's I'm just gonna be like, what? Why? But the scratch labs, like those little droplets, those chews are so good. They're so good.
They're delicious. Yeah. Yeah, totally. And I also think from a even affordability standpoint, like a lot of these sport specific things are expensive. And so if you're training for, say, if you're just training for life and just like enjoy biking, running, whatever endurance sport you're doing, um, it can get really expensive. And so I think it's also important to look at like, yes, how do we get enough calories in us? How do we get calories that we actually want to eat? But also, how do we do this from a financial aspect that actually works and fits for us? And so that can be like scratch gummies because they're delicious and amazing, and they are definitely engineered for a specific thing. But if those are too expensive and out of your price range, it's like we can also get some gummies and like sour gummies or sour worms, and that can actually do a pretty good job too. So, yeah,
Yeah. Go to the 99-cent store and grab a packet of your favorite gummies. They have them where you
yep,
are. They have them over here. I go there all the time.
totally.
So you are an athlete and you were a dancer, you were saying, right? That's your background. You started as a dancer. Do you still do that? Do you still dance? Is that still part of your like daily movement routine?
Totally. Dance will always be a part of my life. I grew up dancing and yeah, was like a trained classical ballet, jazz, all the things. But also
Wow.
living in a, mountain town, we that also allowed us to recreate and play in a lot of other ways, which was a huge privilege. It's like my brother and I built a pump track in our backyard. Biking was biking and running was a form of freedom. Like that was literally my transportation. In high school, I actually got grounded from uh running shoes because I was grounded from life in general. Everything was taken away from me. And so I ran to where I wanted to go. So I got my running shoes taken away. So it was literally like a form of freedom. All movement has been in a way of definitely expression. I definitely in dance. I always say that it was a gave me words when I didn't have the vocabulary to actually speak and be able to communicate my emotions. So dance has always been a part of my life. I'm an aerialist now. I was actually editing like a
Yes.
dance video today to send off to one of our production people. So I'm a artistic director for a aerial dance company. So yeah, dance has been a huge part of
What?
my life for oh yeah, uh-huh. Fun facts.
Is that like the one where there's like a silk swing type of thing and you get to like do all these fun I've always wanted to do that. That
Yeah,
is
I'll
so
send you a
fun.
link to one of our videos. We had one film that we produced during the pandemic, and we've always done aerial theater. So it's instead of it just being like, ta-da, here's a trick, we tell stories through movement, and through
Yeah.
dance and through aerial. And so during the pandemic, obviously everything shut down. We had a big grant we had to use, and we actually installed a piece in Grand Canyon. And so we kind of used the intersection of like climbing and all of our climbing backgrounds and
No
all of our
way.
amazing riggers who are climbers. Yeah, so I'll send you a link to it. Super rad. And yeah, we have another film hopefully being finished in the next few months that yeah tells a big story of the systems that we are a part of and systemic oppression and all the things.
Yes, please send it so I can update this and put everything in the links too that so folks can get see that too. I'm just like I'm in awe right now of people like you who do this stuff. It's just so amazing. It's so amazing. Ooh, what do you say to those folks that think it's too late for them to find help from a nutritionist? There are people who think that they're old. They're in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and they're like, I'm set in my ways, I'm not going to do this. Um, do you think it's too late?
Oh my gosh, it is never too late. I have individuals and athletes from, I mean, there was last week where I had a whole age range from I was like hanging out with someone who was 15 to someone who was 70, and I've had professional athletes that are master's level athletes, that we're looking at their nutrition, trying to get them enough fuel and enough nutrition so that they can continue to do what they love for the rest of their
Yeah.
lives. So that's
Yeah.
always my goal. And I think there's a lot that comes down to that too. And like when we look at for athletes, a lot of times like, well, I want to look at this race or I want to look at my performance now. And we hear a lot, especially in the cycling community, especially more like road, but also mountain, and even in endurance running, but like the quote unquote lighter is faster. And it's like, 1A, that's a big can of worms that we can open. It's not,
Yes.
because we need to look at, again, the long view of what do you want your long-term, not only performance, but also health to look like. And so if you're doing something to just make yourself lighter, we need to look at what's the long-term impacts of that. And so especially if you want to continue riding and being active and all of that when you're 65, 70, 80, we can't look at just this one short-term aspect of how am I going to perform in this race or this year. We need to look at the long-term aspects of, are you feeling your body enough? And we also need to note that always, 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 stronger will always be faster and more resilient than lighter.
Yeah. And do you think that some athletes or just people in general make that connection, right? Or do you think that, okay, let me rephrase this. You've worked with some top level athletes who some, making an assumption, may think that lighter is faster, just as you're saying, right? And these are professional athletes. How hard is it to get through to them that that's not typically the case? Are they receptive to that? Do they understand your method of explaining that to them?
It takes a long time. Typically, especially if it's someone who does have a lot of that paradigm, and especially if they have gotten to a certain level in their career, and maybe they haven't ever encountered this different theory, not even theory, but aspect of nutrition and training, it can be really
Yeah.
hard to unlearn. And I think it's so challenging because in sport, in life, we live in such a world that is fraught with elevating certain body types, certain ways of eating, certain ways of moving, and elevating those and saying those are what we should all be aspiring to without, again, factoring in what's your relationship to food, movement, all of that, which we've talked about. But I
Yeah.
think what happens is that we absorb so much from not only culture and magazines
Yep.
and media, but
Yep.
also coaches, teammates, magazine, like everything. And we are just these sponges. And so there's so much subliminal messaging that we take in on a daily basis. And I think that's the hardest part, is because it takes so much longer to unlearn something than it does to absorb something.
Yeah. 100%. 100%.
So yeah, it can
So it's
take a while,
possible. It just
but
takes a while.
it's possible. It's possible, it takes a while. And again, it's kind of going through a lot of, say, I do have an athlete that's like, well, lighter's faster, or I had my best time in this distance of whatever it is, running, biking, whatever. And it was at this weight. And I always ask them of like, okay, what else was happening at that time? Did you have a partner at that time? Did you have kids at that time? What else was happening in your life and your life stage and throughout your life cycle that
Yeah.
also probably correlated to that time? And actually, big surprise, it probably wasn't your weight. It was probably all these other things. Weird, I know. But once you start to break it down in that sense, I think it's really helpful for people to recognize the bigger picture and then also ask them too of like, well, okay, how has this theory been working for you recently?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
typically it's not well. Because
Yeah.
if they're seeing me, they're probably not recovering well. They're probably not feeling great. At that point, they could have multiple injuries. There's like so many things when people
Yeah.
lovingly land in my lap that there's a reason why they're coming to see me typically. And that can be a helpful thing to just look at like, all right, well, how's that been going for you?
Yeah. Not well.
Yeah.
Uh, I think that is absolutely amazing that you are able to take someone who's so set in their ways and help them be better, because it's hard. It's not easy. And I mean, I can't even ask you, so how long does it typically take for someone to see you? Because I know, again, it varies, right? It depends on the person. It depends how set in their ways they are. It depends how willing they are to learn or want to change, like all those things. Because you can lead a horse to water, but you can't, force them to drink it. So, yeah, I'm just completely amazed by you, Abby, and all the things that you do. I think you're amazing. Oh, we got Johnny.
Oh, thanks.
Johnny's in here, mountain bike Q&A. He's one of our good friends, mountain biker. He's out of Florida. He's hilarious. He also has a podcast. And
Hi,
he's
Johnny.
always doing something funny. Johnny, he's pretty funny. So I was chatting with you a little bit earlier about this thing for Julie at World Ride. She puts on some really good travels throughout the years, and she has a Tanzania trip coming up, and she's like, do you want to go? And I said, sure, but you have to climb 19,000 feet to, Mount Kilimanjaro. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to die. So I'm on my journey of trying to do this by myself now. And do you have people come to you and be like, help me train for this? Because nutrition is, to me, the most important thing when you're training for something like that. Because yes, physical is just as important, but to me, you need to learn how to fuel your body for elevation, for long periods of bike packing, right? Like, do you help athletes do the same thing? And if so, I might come to you for help.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And luckily, I don't know, Flagstaff's at 7,000 feet. So it's nice that, yeah, I get to live in this place that is, apt
You're
for that,
acclimated.
but most of us
Yeah.
don't. Yeah, and that's the wild thing is I actually didn't know that when I was little. I thought it was a normal question to ask people what elevation you live at. Apparently that's not a normal question. Didn't realize that
Would
till I
you
was probably
just
like
go around
15 or
asking that?
16. Yeah, like, oh, cool. Like, what elevation is that at? And it's like, I don't know, because it's like on all of our signs everywhere, and it's just like such a topic of conversation. So it's kind of funny. But I think there's a lot of things that are essential when it comes to training and performing at elevation. Because most people, again, don't live at elevation in general across the world. So,
Yes.
one of the main things is looking at your iron and ferritin levels. So, that would be the number one thing I would do from a clinical aspect is to get those checked and look at those. And if, when you look at them and get your blood drawn, there's clinical ranges, but I would also say for the majority of athletes, that's probably not going to be adequate. And if you're on the lower end of that, then that's something that we should definitely look at of like probably increasing iron stores, increasing ferritin levels so that you actually have the oxygen carrying capacity in your blood to get nutrients to every cell, like your brain and your liver and your kidneys, but also your muscle cells, obviously. And so that's so iron is the iron or the oxygen carrying protein and molecule in your red blood cells that help deliver nutrients. So that's one, first and foremost, is getting those checked, ensuring that they're adequate. Another thing is looking at your overall, once you actually are at altitude, your body is going to be already utilizing more energy and calories at rest because you're breathing more and breathing takes up energy and calories. And that's, I think, one of the things that people forget, even just in training and life in general, of people like, how do I fuel my rides? And I'm like, great. That's like the icing on the cake. Let's look at everything else first of what are you actually doing in the rest of your day because people just want to talk about the fancy stuff. But if we have that dialed, but we don't have, breakfast, lunch, dinner, other snacks in your day dialed, then what you're doing when you're training isn't going to matter. And so that's number one is making sure that in life, but also at altitude, that you have enough calories in general.
Yeah.
And then we also need to look at, from a carbohydrate standpoint, is carbohydrates, you are going to need more of them at altitude overall.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so ensuring that you have enough carbohydrates, but eating enough and eating enough carbs and eating enough protein can be really challenging. And so to get enough calories, we also need to ensure, how do we do this in a way that's not going to just make you feel really overloaded and like have your gut feel funky and feel really overfull. And so that's where we can actually utilize a lot of fats as well to get those calories in, while also matching up, do you have enough calorie or carbs and protein? Um, Another aspect is at elevation, you breathe more. So we need to look at your hydration. That's something that we call insensible water loss. Is every time, if you were to breathe on a window or something like that, you're going to see some vapor, and then you can draw a smiley face in it. And so every time you're exhaling, you are losing more water. So
What?
hydration is key. Oh, yep. Yep. So that's also why you'll get more dehydrated at high elevation. And so ensuring that you have enough water at baseline, but also, especially during activity, you're going to be breathing harder. Your lungs are going to be working more. So we need even more than you would typically need at sea level.
Damn. That's
Hmm.
insane. I'm early. My mind is just blown right now. I did not know that. I mean, it makes sense, right? But I didn't know that at all. Every time I go to
And then,
Sedona and we ride over there, it's the same thing. I feel like I'm gonna die because it's, granted it's not 7,000 feet, but I'm coming from literally sea level. So it's what, like 5,500
and
somewhere?
yeah, something like that. And what the interesting thing about elevation in a high desert is that it's super dry. So where you're coming from, it's also humid. So when you are breathing in, there's probably a little bit more hydration coming into your body versus if you're in a high desert and it's really dry, you're not getting in that other humidity to keep
Uh-huh.
not only your nasal passages and all of your other like mucous membranes nice and wet and moist. And so because of that, you're going to be even thirstier if it's also dry.
Damn. You're like,
Yeah.
I'm blown away right now. That's amazing. The knowledge that you have is just absolutely insane. So many people could benefit from learning this stuff. It's just crazy. So then training at altitude is a thing because you need to learn to that baseline you're talking about, right? How your body's going to react to it, how to hydrate, how to make sure your body is reacting well. Um, I used to have a dog that had altitude sickness, the poor thing. The first time we took him to the mountains, he just threw up all over the place and he was a little wobbly. And my wife's like, we need to get him some water, make sure that he stays hydrated. The poor thing. I never felt so bad for a dog in my life. And then never again. We could go to Sedona with him, but we went to like Big Bear, the mountains up here. So it's a little bit higher, but the poor guy, he was not having a good time.
It's challenging, and really, once you actually do have that altitude, altitude sickness, basically, um, the best thing to do is obviously get lower. And so slowly climatizing yourself. So it's like once you fly in, stay a few days there. Once you're at altitude, go up a few thousand more feet, hang out there if you have the luxury of doing that. So your body actually can adjust. That will decrease the likelihood of nausea, vomiting, dizziness, all of that. But once that
Yeah.
starts to happen, and if that gets to a point to where your body can't regulate, then, and if you're vomiting and all of that, the best thing to do is be able to come back down, rehydrate, renourish, and then see if you can start to go back up.
Yeah. Yeah. Dang. All right. We're going to talk after this for this trip. I don't know. I'm a little intimidated by this, but I don't
It's
know.
amazing that world ride trips are amazing. Julie's fantastic, and yeah, just a gem of a human. So you have to go.
Have you been on one? You've been to the Guatemala one. Is that right? How
Yeah,
was
so last
that?
year got to go. That was super fun. So we got to go with World Ride and Shredley. That was amazing. And
Yeah.
Yeah, I love Guatemala. It was such a blast. But yeah, Julie's so great at just creating experiences and creating things that you wouldn't necessarily see in on, other trips if you're just traveling there. So she's just, yeah, a gem of a human and so great at making local
Yeah.
connections. I mean, that's the whole purpose of World Ride in general, but
Yeah.
yeah, highly recommend.
Yeah, I haven't met her in person. We've talked a lot, but I think we're gonna meet in Sedona at the fest in a couple weeks. Are you coming to the fest?
Yeah, I'll be there with Shredley.
Yes. Can you come on our group ride, our ladies ride on Sunday? I was trying to talk Ashley into it.
I can probably I'll see what I can do. I can probably make it.
It's at 11 with the Sedona Mountain Bike Academy. Just like an intermediate ride through the Soldiers Pass area. Should be a fun time.
Fun.
I thought I was going to get to meet you in October when I went to Sedona because we did a Halloween ride. And I remember, I don't know who I was talking to. I think it was Emma. She was like, isn't Abby supposed to be here? Or rolling out. And someone's like, I don't know. Is she supposed to be?
I know. So it was actually really sweet. So I was going to go, and partially because of you, I was like, all right, I'll go. I'll totally go. It's easy. But then my niece, who's this little tiny shredder, who's so freaking cool, she it was like the only weekend that like our schedules aligned, and I was like, all right, let's go ride. So I took her on a ride instead, which was
Oh,
cute.
that's worth it.
I know.
I mean, I'll
And I made her go down
obviously.
drops,
Of
which
course.
she was terrified of. And I was like, you can do this. And so we did it. We like looked at it first, and then I spotted her on it, and then she sent it 3 times, and so
Oh,
cool.
that's so good. How old is she?
She's 11.
Oh, I have an 11-year-old niece too. That's like a fun age because they're getting gutsy. Yeah.
They're gutsy, and yeah, they're so freaking cool. Yeah, she actually might be at the fest, so we'll see.
Yes, that's so much fun. We're doing a ladies talk too at the fest. We're doing some rides. We got some raffles. We've got some good stuff going on. It'll be good to see you. I can't wait for this thing. It's a much needed. I'm gonna be there for a week, so it's much needed to do this stuff and nothing else.
Nice.
Switching gears real quick, I wanted to touch on your business that you have, Evolve Flagstaff. And am I pronouncing that correctly? Is it Evolve?
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. One of the things, like when I found you, I really loved the fact that y'all have a bunch of different folks on staff that have specializations in different things, physical therapists, acupuncturists, all the things. But also, something that stood out to me was how you all work with people who are going through injury as well. So the physical therapy aspect, but how you marry that nutrition recovery with the injury. Because people don't think, I didn't think of that either. Never thought about like, I usually think this is my way out. Okay, I'm injured. I'm going to pig out for a little bit and eat all my things and not worry about it. But you guys do a really good job about that. Can you touch a little bit on how you guys came together to create that? Like, what was the idea behind that?
It's so funny that you just used the word marry there, because I'm married to our physical therapist. So that's how
Well,
it all
that's awesome.
started. Yeah. So I joke that my husband Brian, that our first date was a business planning meeting. It was not, but we were both little clinical babies at that point, and I was like, "Here's what I want to do," and he's like, "That's great. That's what I want to do." And so it turned out to
Oh,
be, there's so much around like the physical body and building resiliency from a nutritional aspect, because that is our foundation. And then looking at, okay, how do we do that in actual movement and training, and how do we utilize nutrition to not only first and foremost prevent injury, because if it's an overuse injury, so we have kind of a
yes.
screening form for all of our clinicians where, or like kind of screening criteria where it's like, if you have an athlete or someone who's come to you, maybe they don't even identify as an athlete, but someone who has either a stress fracture or multiple overuse injuries in a year, or if you're not seeing adequate healing times that you would expect, that's a straight up consult to me. basically, or to one of our dietitians, because at that point, there's a reason why their body isn't responding. So it could come from a stress level. So stress meaning too much training, inadequate recovery, not sleeping, life stress. But there's also a huge aspect to that, which is always nutritionally related as well. And so if we're not actually giving our body the foundational nutrients and energy that it needs, it's not going to be able to heal. And so when we do get injured, people think of that a lot, where they're like, oh, okay, well,
Yeah.
it's either I'm not exercising as much or training as much, so I don't need to eat as much. And I'm like, false. If you're injured, and depending on the injury, you probably most definitely need to be eating more. We need to definitely be looking at nutrition. Are you getting enough protein? Are you getting enough nutrients, depending on what the wound or whatever the injury is, especially if it's a bone related thing? We often think of, we always think of muscle and like building muscle mass. We always hear about that. And like protein. Yes, protein is really important. Love protein. But one thing that we don't think about is, the thing that actually holds our body up, which is our bones. And our bones are turning over all the time, every single day, every single second, just like our muscles. So bones are nutritionally modifiable tissue, just like everything else that exists in our body. And so if we aren't giving our body adequate micronutrients, calcium, vitamin D, vitamin K, magnesium, all these different aspects, and if we're not giving them enough calories to be able to complete this metabolic process, then they're going to break down. And at that point, if your bones are breaking, we've got a big problem. And that can take anywhere from, there's big aspects. Have you ever heard of REDS, relative energy deficiency in sport?
I have not.
So fun. Okay. So for a long time, there was this thing called the female athlete triad. And what it was, well, let me back up. For a long time, women were supposed to participate in sport in general because, our uteruses might fall out. Our bodies couldn't withstand it. Lots
We're
of
fragile.
things.
We're fragile.
We're
Fragile
so
human beings.
fragile. Exactly. And so we just weren't ever allowed to eat enough food to be able to meet our nutrient needs, especially with activity. So for a long time, it was called the female athlete triad, which is basically 3 different aspects. So it's hormonal dysfunction. So meaning irregular or missing periods, bone abnormalities and bone changes. So broken bones, stress fractures, osteopenia, osteoporosis, and then eating disorders or inadequate energy intake and inadequate caloric intake. And so that's what it was for a long time until the International Olympic Committee came out with a huge statement and big research that like, oh, this is actually not just a female thing. Females just have typically the lovely privilege of having a monthly menstrual cycle. Birth control is a whole different thing. But so we have this monthly reminder, and our menstrual cycle is another, it's just like blood pressure. It's just another metric that we have to say, is our body functioning in the way that we need it and want it to? And if not, again, birth control aside, birth control kind of will skew that monthly cycle or can mask symptoms for a lot of times for a lot of people. But they found that, we're actually not just seeing this in women, we're seeing this in men as well. And by the way, it's not just bone injuries that we're running into. There's now this huge myriad of symptoms to where it's gastrointestinal issues, where it's mental health issues. When we start to look at also, we always hear that athletes should have a low resting heart rate. Yeah, it's going to be lower than the average individual who isn't an athlete. But if it's really low, that also tells us that, your body doesn't have enough nutrition to be able to support your vital organs. So
mind blown.
Yeah, and there's, again, when it comes to the gastrointestinal aspect, so many people come to me and they're like, oh man, my gut's upset, I need to eliminate gluten and dairy and all these different things because they upset it. And outside of that, first and foremost, again, I'm coming in with, are you actually eating enough? Because your gastrointestinal system is one of the main things that takes up a ton of energy and calories in your body on a daily basis. And so if we're not eating enough, it's not going to function very well. And then the more we restrict or cut things out, the worse it's going to function. So a lot of people don't even see that as a sign that, oh, maybe I'm not getting enough calories. It always goes to, first and foremost, like, how do I restrict instead of what can I add?
Yeah, that's something you taught me too. It's not restricting,
Mm-hmm.
it's adding, which is very different. It's very difficult for someone who has an eating disorder and has been taught their whole life. It goes back to what we were talking about earlier, how you have to unlearn things that you were taught or behaviors that you had to do since you were a child. And people always telling you that you were chubby or fat, or are you really going to eat that? Or, like that's just things that scar someone, regardless of gender. I'm sure guys go through it just as much as, well, women definitely, but can't speak for men, but women for
Totally.
sure. I mean, it's horrible. I love that. I feel like my mind was just blown with all this science and all this knowledge that I'm gonna have to like re-listen to this podcast and like really absorb all of the things. You did a reel the other day, and I know for y'all that are listening, there's a few people in the chat. There's Johnny and JT. These are super cool dudes here that are hanging out with us. But I want you guys to go to Abby's Instagram. I'm going to share my screen here real quick to show you guys, because she has like the best tidbits ever. And I think it's so informative and so funny. Like, you did one the other day that was about no one should be eating 1,200 calories like in a day, right? Where was it? It was this one here. What,
Yep.
And I love her, like, that you don't know. Like, I love this because the way you even like clapped your hands there, I was like, listen to her, Mia. Stop restricting your food. You should not be eating. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like such a good reminder of that.
It's such a good reminder. And again, people think of, calories in, calories out, right? And even this 1,200 calorie rhetoric, it actually dates back to 1912 with a doctor who published a book who was like, you will no longer see food as food, you will see it as numbers instead. When we actually look at her book and her history, I don't know her. I can't diagnose her. I can't diagnose as a dietitian in general, but definitely red flags of disordered eating, most likely eating disorder. And that's really where it came from. And it was about that you should be able to maintain a certain size. You should be able to, and again, this is for all bodies of all ethnicities, which when we look at even just, a calorie counter or macro counter, MyFitnessPal, whatever, all of that data is also based on white men. So we need to really expand it a little bit more and recognize that, like, oh, the metrics that we're using are also most likely flawed. And, I will look at calories and macros and all that and use them for my clients as like a baseline. But then we also need to look at so many other factors. And in my practice, I typically don't have people ever really track or count or do a whole ton of that, because it's mind numbing in general and takes up far too much time and far too much energy. And it's completely, really irrelevant overall, because we're also very bad at estimating things and very bad at just tabulating. And so I think there's a lot where people, again, think calories in, calories out. And it's like they forget, especially when you put it in, say, as MyFitnessPal, and you're like, I want to lose X amount. It's going to give you a very low number. And that's just counting for, like, oh, I want to lose weight. So it gives you how much your body theoretically needs. Again, likely error in that data in general. And then if you're then trying to lose weight on that, it's going to decrease that. And then you're throwing activity on top of that. And sure, you can do anything for a week, a month, maybe even a few months. But eventually what will happen if you're in a caloric restriction, it's going to impact your mental health, your physical health, and you will then not be able to do it anymore. You're going to feel like a failure. You're going to feel like, I'm bad. I feel I am not worthy enough. I can't do this. Why is this so easy for other people? We then end up most likely in more of a binge state or an effort mentality. and the cycle continues, and it becomes this super vicious cycle. And especially for athletes that I work with who exist in fat bodies or larger bodies, it has always been that paradigm of eating less. And it's so cool when I can actually get them to eat more, and all of the sudden they improve in their overall recovery. They improve in their times. They improve if they're a athlete in more of like a lifting type sport. Like they are just breaking PRs. They feel good. They're sleeping well. Everything is so different when we start to shift from, again, this caloric number based thing to actually, are we getting enough and meeting our needs? And then their mental health improves. And so there's this whole like ripple effect that comes out of it that's just beautiful when we actually just give our bodies enough.
Yeah, and you're right. It's trying to stop that cycle, but in order to stop that cycle, you need to realize that you have to break the habit, and you have to allow your body to adjust to understanding how that works. I go through that to this day. Like, I'm not going to lie. It's a hard habit to break. It's been 40 years of me learning one thing, but it's not going to be fixed in 6 months or whatever. It's a constant work. Like, I always have my shrink in the back of my head where she says, like, if one tire is slashed, are you going to go and slash the other three? Meaning, so if I eat something I feel like I'm not supposed to eat, and then you just talked about the F it mentality, right? Like, well, F it, I just had that, so now I'm going to have the next 3 beers or whatever. And I always have her in the back of my head. She's like, it's okay if you did that, but what are you going to do? Like, you're going to slash the tires and you're just not going to move? Like, that's no way to accomplish your goals, right? And this brings me to this, which is true when you're talking about doing things with intention, which is so important as well. It's not just for the short-term goal, but to doing it with intention. If you guys like are watching this right now, or if you're listening, please go give Abby a follow, because she's absolutely amazing and inspirational. When I least expected, you pop up on my feed, and I was like, okay, I'll listen to her today.
Needed that. Yeah, my voice
Needed
lives
that.
rent free in a lot of people's heads, I think.
Well, something came up the other day too, that your voice popped up in my head. I don't know what it was. I think I was just having a bad day, and I said something very negative about myself out loud. And I don't know who I was talking to, but I was with a friend, and they were like, why are you talking about my friend like that? Stop talking about my friend like that. And I remember you telling me that. You saying, like, if one of your friends starts talking negative about them, are you going to tell them to stop? And I'm like, yeah, because they're not like that. And so, like, you popped up in my head like so many times thinking about that. Oh, it's
Totally.
so needed.
We have these hypercritical voices that live inside of our heads, and it's things that, again, we've absorbed through culture. And a lot of times, for people that I work with, it's like, well, for the rare person, it's like, well, my mom never told me that I needed to change my body or diet or look a certain way. But what ended up happening is like, but I observed the way that they talked about themselves, like my caregiver, whether it be mom, dad, aunt, grandma, whoever, about how they talked about their bodies. And I think especially when it comes to from a like more of a female identifying standpoint of, we are so good at body bashing and even bonding over that. There's like clinical research about that, which is
Yeah.
horrible. But I think it's really important to look at, how are we not only talking to ourselves inside, but also what are the things that we are also participating in other aspects of conversation, and how are we, again, being an active participant in continuing this, really all these like little micro traumas against our bodies and against food and against our minds.
Yeah. Yeah. Johnny, what are you talking about? He says he needs tidbits. Working on my gut right now, but not right now. You're such a jokester, Johnny. Go talk to Abby. She'll help you out. It's all that Florida sun and the beer and the boat that you get on all the time. You're living your best life, Johnny. Enjoy it. Yeah, no, I'm not 21, trail pimp, but thank you for the kind comment. I do think I look younger than I actually am, but age is just a number, Age is literally just a number. It don't matter. It don't matter. How can folks come to you? How can they find you if they want your guidance and expertise and help? Is it through the website? Your
Yeah.
website?
So evolveflg.com, evolveflagstaff.com. Well, evolve FLG, but we are Evolve Flagstaff. Yeah. And so again, we
Right
are
here.
so we are nutrition. We have physical therapists on staff, acupuncture, and then we have an entire amazing team of strength coaches. And really what we do is we do all of this work again under the same lens that is from a non-diet approach, that is from a non-weight centric approach, and it's just looking at, okay, what do you need to feel good in your life, to feel good in your sport, to feel good in whether it's even just chasing your kids around, whatever you want to do, how do we help you do that in a way that's actually going to again promote that long-term goal of whatever your goal is. And so it's really beautiful. Yeah, we have a whole amazing team that works you can work with us in a lot of different ways. You can work with me from a nutrition standpoint. You can interact with our physical therapists. And then again, from the gym side, there's some people at our gym that never see me for nutrition, and that's beautiful and great and fine. But there's a lot of different ways that you can kind of tap in and interact, and it's awesome. And so we work
That's awesome.
virtually. We will set up strength training programs or even injury rehab programs for people in Flagstaff or even outside of Flagstaff. I work with people virtually as well. And yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I love the facility too. The gym that you guys have is amazing. Do you need to be seeing one of you guys there to use the gym, or can someone just join the gym, for a fee as well?
You can just join the gym. So we have group classes. We have a foundations program, which is for individuals who are either new to strength training or are coming off an injury, or who even just want a more chill environment because gyms can be a lot for people. They can be really overwhelming, really
Yeah,
overstimulating. And so that's a really beautiful space we have. It's really small group. It's 5 people, one trainer, and then we have our big group classes where it's like upwards of 20. And then we also just have open gym access. So people can come in and they can do, we have every day has a programmed workout. And so you can access it on your phone, whether you are in Flagstaff or wherever you are in the world. We have people in New York. We have people in California. We have kind of people all over
yeah,
who can access us. And it's an app, and you have videos, and it has a breakdown of why you're doing the exercise, scaling options, and a whole different variety. So, yeah, there's a lot of people that will come and see us from a clinical standpoint, but a lot of people who just are a part of our amazing community and
yeah,
hopefully don't need to see us clinically. That's really the goal too, is the gym gets to be this kind of like, I joke that the gym is the lab that we get actually train things with intention under tension, but
hmm
it's also a place where it's like, if you're here, like, hopefully you don't have to see your PT because hopefully you're not getting injured. Hopefully you're building resiliency there. And then even through
yeah.
nutritional things, we don't ever promote diets. We never have weight loss challenges. We don't have mirrors. We have a very specific group of, community agreements. When you walk in this space, like, we are not going to talk down to our bodies. We're not going to talk down to ourselves. There is no hierarchy of you're better because you're lifting a higher amount versus someone else. And
I
that, I
love
think,
that.
also breeds a really beautiful community to where hopefully we're not perpetuating a lot of those really negative food and diet and body perceptions. So hopefully they don't have to see me. And that would be cool.
Yeah. That's so true. That's so true. Johnny says he's going to cancel his therapist tomorrow. Yeah, why not? Go see Abby.
Do it
She's
up.
absolutely bomb. I don't
I'm
see a
not a
therapist
therapist, but
anymore.
I do nutrition counseling.
Honestly, your counseling sessions, this is my personal opinion, and I'm not sucking up, was better than my therapy sessions because I think it hit all of the things that I needed guidance on for me, someone with an eating disorder, to learn the mental aspect of it, because that's the biggest issue I think for people with nutrition is not understanding the mental aspect of it. And the way to break that habit is to learn, really, is to just
Yeah, and I
learn.
think, yeah, and that's the difference too of working with a really great dietitian. I think there's some nutrition coaches that can also interact in that space. That's kind of that nebulous space in between therapy and nutrition counseling. But if someone is working in this space with working on your relationship to food and from a place with eating disorders and disordered eating and has that background, we're going to talk about other things. Like there's the whole Instagram thing of like, I'm so and so, like I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. I don't know if you've seen that, but it's like I'm going to ask you about, you know, what were your caregiver's relationship to food. I'm going to ask you about your poop. I'm going to ask you about your sleep. I'm going to ask you about how are you talking to yourself? What does that voice sound like inside of your head? I'm going to ask you about what are your personal values? I'm going to ask you so many things that a lot of times people will leave session and be like, oh, that felt like counseling. I'm like, it is nutrition counseling.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's so good. It's so good. Oh man, I appreciate you so much coming on and talking to us about it. I know your time is precious and valuable, and I hope that anyone listening today has gotten something really useful out of it. And please contact Abby. At a minimum, you need to follow her on Instagram. Like she's freaking awesome. I'm no joke. I'm gonna put all the information below. Thank you to everyone who came on and joined us. We've got a few people in the chat over here. I can always count on Johnny and Trail Pimp to come out and show support. I love them. You guys are amazing. JT's in here too. I think I saw him. This is awesome. Thank you, Abby. I'm going to let you go. I know you've been traveling today. You're probably tired. Yeah, no, thank you again. Is there something you wanted to maybe talk about or touch on that we didn't? Something you want to tell the folks at home?
I think the main thing is if you have been trying to chase a certain diet or a certain body size for your whole life, or if you've jumped around to a million things, it's probably not right for you. So eating enough will always be the best thing for you as a human, as well as an athlete. Working on your relationship to food and your relationship to self is really huge. And that's again, just so you can continue to like go ride your bike and have fun because
Yeah.
there's not that many fun things in life, and that's a fun thing. So we should keep doing it.
We didn't even touch on you being a cyclist. Dang it. We need to do like a part two. Like she's such a kick-ass like cyclist too, people. Okay. We're gonna sit on a mountain bike festival in a couple weeks, and maybe I'll do like a trailside interview because that's appropriate. We're at the mountain bike festival. You're gonna ride with us. All right, we're gonna do that.
Oh yeah.
That's the plan.
Totally do it.
That's the plan. Thank you so much, Abby. You are amazing. Everyone have a great night. Thanks for tuning in. Yeah, and we'll see you all next time. Have a great night. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Yeah.